let's start with ISO 31000, because that's the guide that everybody should be following globally on risk. And I see that as a really useful way of helping you as an organization work out how to achieve great risk management. And it's a support to help you on your journey to becoming a risk intelligent organization. ISO 31000 is made up of 3 different bits: the principles, which I call the why, the framework, which is the what, and the process, which is how you go about doing it. So most people just get straight into the process, but actually the principles and the framework are really important. The principles sit at the top level of an organization, and the framework sort of more in the middle level with all the responsibilities and authorities and who does what. The process, of course, is the machinery and requires engagement across the whole organization. But one of the things that we're going to look at specifically today, we're not going to go into all the details of the principles, the framework, the process. That's perhaps for another day. But we are going to talk about how having those important conversations, how you engage in those conversations to support risk intelligent decision making. We're called Risk Decisions. I've been in risk for 30 odd years, working for Risk Decisions, and we've still got a long way to go to get management really making good decisions. Right, so we're going to focus on risk conversations. How do we kickstart those conversations? Well, a few years ago, we started looking at risk and how people perceived risk. And there's an awful lot of focus on health and safety and compliance, and everybody feels like that's all a bit boring. And we realized that there were an awful lot of negative words around risk. So people's mindset is that it's all about compliance and protecting against losses and disaster recovery and so on. Now, all of those things are important, of course they are, but it gives people this really negative view of risk. Whereas really we should be thinking more positively, because as John A. Shedd, who I'd never heard of before, says, but I love this quote: "A ship in harbour is safe, but that is not what ships are built for." So if we're going to run a business successfully, we have to get out there and we have to take some risk. So how do we do that successfully? Well, we need to have a slightly sort of change our mindset around this and consider much more confident and strategic words about risk, embracing risk, agility, the vision you have for risk, being curious about risk. Of course, it doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't be careful about risk. As Richard Branson says, we take a lot of calculated risks, but we make sure that no one risk is going to topple everything. Protecting the downside is critical. So while we want to take risks, we also want to make sure that we are protecting the downside. But it's both. We need to think about both. So, okay, we're going to move on to thinking about who are the people. People have conversations. So what are the prerequisites of a person who is going to have be capable of having great risk conversations? Well, curiosity was one of the items on the last slide, but also these other things: open-mindedness, being imaginative, thinking out of the box. You have to be courageous. We all know it's a bit tricky. Being a whistleblower isn't real. It's a bit career limiting. But if you've got a safe environment within your organization and you have the courage to speak up, then problems can be solved much earlier in the life cycle of anything you're trying to achieve. And of course, ISO 31000, the definition of risk is uncertainty against your objectives. So you need to have the courage to say, I don't think we're going to achieve this because of these risks. What can we do about it? And being honest. And of course, finally, wrapping all this up into risk intelligence. Right, so let's look at the organization. Most organizations have some kind of hierarchical structure. Here we've got since we're interested, I'm assuming, being on this Project Controls Expo, you're interested in programs, projects, and so on. But of course, programs and projects aren't the only things that have risks. Also, on the other side, operations, your projects are going to need to be used one day. So what we need to do is to make sure that we're getting great guidance on risk vision from the top and making risk-based decisions from the bottom up. And not only do we need to have that going up and down, but also side to side, because functions support programs, projects, operations, and so on. So the whole organization needs to be engaged and joined up and connected on risk. And it's a lot of this is about connecting risk, and connecting risk means having conversations. So let's talk about communicating in your organization, and particularly communicating risk. So here we've got some slightly funny looking odd people. The person at the top is communicating down to the middle management level the objectives of the organization, the risk vision and risk appetite for the company. I'm sure many of you have heard all these words. Also at the middle level, you need to make sure your risk framework has very clear information about authority and responsibility and accountability. And of course, we all know that we have to follow policy, and we need to turn vision and objectives into strategy so that we can deliver up against those objectives. So all of this stuff involves having conversation, and risk needs to be inserted into those conversations. Down at the bottom level, of course, people still need to make decisions, but they're likely to be doing tactical risk management at that level. But doesn't mean to say you've got some of those people with their hands up there going, excuse me, there's a problem here. Well, we need to work out how to convey that information up a level, because the executive board really want to know about the problems that are going on. It's just how do you actually convey that information in a proactive way in time that you can do things about it, so they can make decisions that are actually going to have a meaningful and timely effect on being able to deliver your objectives. So we move it up to the middle, where in the middle you've got people across the organization. You saw that last picture, the cross-cutting decisions. You don't just have people making decisions within projects, within programs, but you have them making it at portfolio level, at the functional level, at operational level, and at senior management level, which of course is where you're pushing that information up to the top, where you've got big hitting decisions. Those big hitting decisions could be about commissioning a project or cancelling a project. Those things are very valid decisions, but making those decisions early with the best information you can requires communication across the company. One of the things you're trying to achieve is not only risk-based decisions, of course, but also building confidence into the company, ensuring that the entire company is on the same page about how you're going to achieve your objectives and the strategy to get there. And without risk embedded in that conversation, you're going to be missing something, and then suddenly stuff starts going wrong and it's too late to do something about it. Okay, all of these kind of discussions and achieving this kind of grown-up risk intelligent organization requires a positive culture. So let's just have a look at some of the cornerstones we call of having a positive risk culture. So you need to build on strong foundations. Now the foundations are things like having ISO 31000 on having your framework, having your principles and processes in place, making sure that you've got those communication channels two-way. So it isn't just somebody saying, tell me about, it's actually having a conversation back the other way and communicating decisions. Trust and being in it together, we're always stronger if we work together on something. Well, strong, positive risk conversations, that's what this presentation is all about. One of the things I think is really interesting is to fail fast and learn from your mistakes. The sooner you realize there's a problem, the sooner you can fix it. So that comes back to trust as well. If people don't trust each other, they'll keep quiet about a problem, and then it's too late to do something about it, or at least it's too late to do something about it in a cost-effective way. So it's all about cost effectiveness. And lastly, and probably most importantly, you have to have the board on board. If you don't have senior management supporting you, then you're going to have problems trying to get any decisions through the organisation, and in particular being able to make fast and timely decisions. Again, another quote that I absolutely love is, take risks. If you win, you'll be happy. If you lose, you'll be wise. And I haven't been able to find out where that comes from. It's an anonymous quote. Right. Okay, so we're going to move on to looking at how do we actually support having risk conversations with toolset, because we're in the technology track at Project Controls Expo. So we are going to talk about how we can demonstrate that with our software, Predict. On this page, you can see Predict is made up of a number of elements, different bits to it. So the big screen is the main risk database, which is where you track your risks, and probably even more importantly, track your actions to deal with those risks. That's something which is available across multiple platforms that you can get on a tablet and mobile devices. But today we're going to focus, and Trevor is going to talk to you about two things. The two medium-sized screens on the left is Risk Visualiser, which more about shortly, and on the right, which is Risk Analyser. And Risk Analyser, well, risk analysis has been around a long time, but I still think not enough organisations are using it effectively. So we're going to put in front of you a poll for you to answer on what you're doing on risk analysis. So the question is, do you perform Monte Carlo on your projects? And we've got 4 responses. And I think this poll is, you can only answer 1. Is that right, Trevor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, do you perform Monte Carlo on your projects? And the answer could be, I only do it at the beginning when I'm setting up the bid, understanding, how to get the bid through, the business case through, and get my project underway. But then I don't do it after that. I do it regularly throughout the project. So with monthly reviews or quarterly or however regular your project needs them. Thirdly, just to get through stage gates. So suddenly there's a big review coming up and, oh my goodness, we better do a review. And if you get into the detail of estimates at complete and so on, and you do a risk analysis at that stage, or never.
But at the moment, pleased to say that we're actually getting most people saying, so 63% at the moment are saying regularly through the project. And we have got a couple that come in and said they never use Monte Carlo. And then a few more, 27% around just to get through stage gates, and 10% only at the beginning. So thank you very much for that. So what I'm going to do, seeing as we did have a few people there who said that never use Monte Carlo on their projects, just to bring everyone up to speed. What is Monte Carlo analysis? What are we doing? We use it to, as it says, modeling a situation. So we're going to input our estimates about how uncertain things might be in terms of perhaps durations of activities within a project, but also about risks. How likely, what's the probability that they're going to occur? And if they do occur, how might they impact us? And then the Monte Carlo tool will run through this multiple times, taking random samples from each of our ranges of estimates and probabilities, etc. And that then gives us a distribution of possible outcomes. So here's an example. I've got a risk register here, and you can see I've got the probability of risks occurring on the left-hand side. And then if they do, a range, 3-point estimates in this case, of what that financial impact might be. And running that through the Monte Carlo analysis, we end up with a distribution of the potential total cost impact of all of those risks. And you can see you get the standard curve here showing us the main majority of outcomes are in the middle there. But we do get some sort of outliers as well, and these sometimes are more interesting than the parts in the middle there. So we can also see the S-curve, as it's called, the cumulative distribution, and this is what enables us to say things like, well, 90% of the time, then these risks are costing us less than 730,000. Okay? And these are the sorts of things that we might want to be put into a contractual position, perhaps budgeting to only spend 50% confidence values. So what I'm going to do now is to actually go live and actually try these things out and show you how we can actually use the visualizations. So sitting here, I've got a very simple risk register, and this does contain behind the scenes the probabilities and the potential impacts of these risks. Now, one of the things that we can do is obviously just run a simple report against these. And here I've got a quick risk overview report, and it's giving me some basic information about the potential impacts of these risks. As you can see here, if I add up the mean impact of each of these risks, it's over 5 million. Right? But if I factor it, i.e. multiply the mean impact by the probability of the risk occurring, and then add those up, I'm around 1.4 million. So this is something, it's quite often the value people will be taking as their risk contingency value. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually run the Monte Carlo analysis against this, and simply click the Analyze button here. And it's asking me to say confirm, which I want. And it will now be running the Monte Carlo analysis for me. Here we go, you can actually see it, so you can tell it's live, it's actually running the analysis at the moment. And that's now completed, and here's my distribution of potential total costs. And I can see straight away here that 90% of the time I'm going to be the impact's going to be about is going to be less than 2.8 million. Now, if you remember, when we looked at our contingency value by taking the factored mean, that was only 1.4 million. Yeah, so I'm actually doubling that potential impact straight away. And in fact, if I move this up all the way to the top here, 100%. So it could cost me up to 5.6 million. That's 4 million over our potential contingency. Right? So these straight away are things that are helping us talk to people about risk and what we need to do about it. Over on the right-hand side here, you can see I've got what we call a tornado chart, showing which risks are actually driving the total cost the most. But not only that, within Predict Risk Analyzer, you can actually see down at the bottom right-hand corner here, it's telling me how much this particular risk, the planning approval delayed risk in this instance, is contributing to my overall impact confidence value of the 90% confidence value. Now, if we want to start talking to people about these risks, what we could begin to do is to look at scenarios to say, well, okay, what happens if we remove the conflict between contractors risk? So we're just trying things out. All right, the system is running through again for us. Right, and so I'm now recalculating what things would look like. Let it finish that. There we go. So interestingly, even though I removed the conflict between contractors risk, my 90% confidence value has stayed about the same. But if I move up to here, my 100% confidence has now dropped down below 5 million. It was above 5.5 million beforehand. So you can begin to see where these impacts are occurring. Right? And it's risks like this, sometimes called tombstone risks, that have got a low probability of occurring, but a potentially high impact, that are some of the things that we need to be looking at. Other things that we can do here, I've always been looking at just sort of single impact values at the moment. So I'm looking at the current impact. Now, most of the time, and in fact, you'll see it back on our register when we go back there in a minute, that we want to be looking at both our current assessment of the risk impact and our target assessment as well. If we perform our actions, where are we going to get to? And we can quickly look at that over here as well by moving to the target side. And what's that giving me is showing me how much better off we should be if our mitigation actions perform as we hope. Now, this sort of thing relies on you putting in accurate information about where you really expect to be after having performed the actions, but also how much do you think those actions are going to cost you as well. And if we have got that sort of information, then over here, my tornado chart really now is actually showing me a cost-benefit ratio. So it's the difference between the target impact and the current impact divided by the cost of those mitigation actions. Okay? So these top two here are definitely worth doing because we're getting back a lot more than our cost. Down here, we might be saving quite a bit of money, but it's probably costing us a fair amount as well. Okay? So you need to be looking at this type of thing and having these conversations with people to work out which are the actions that you need to perform. Okay. Now, I've started the risk analysis from Risk Controller. I can actually upload the results back into Risk Controller as well. And that enables me then to see how things are going. So I can actually run a trend report. Okay. And this, once it's, oh blimey, it's finished already. It's actually showing me, so every time I've written my results back, I'm getting a data point and a simple graphic here. So when we first started things, they were my cost impacts was relatively high. So the green line here is my 90% confidence, the blue is my 50, and the red is my 10% confidence. They dropped down, went back up, seem to be getting better, but I'm afraid they're now actually getting worse, so that the trend is going back up again. So this sort of combination of being able to run the analysis, to understand what your confidences are in terms of your contingency values, and then how those are changing over time, really give management some great information about what they should be doing, where they need to concentrate their efforts. That's all very well and good and relatively straightforward if you think about it from a Monte Carlo analysis point of view. And we were looking at just cost there. But sitting down here, seeing as we're at project controls, I've imported a project. So I've got some risks that are associated with my project. And if I want to have a look at the tasks, the activities within there, you can see how those are broken down. And there's a little number against there, which is indicating that this particular risk has been associated with this activity. And likewise, when other ones are there as well. But overall, there are 3 risks associated with the schedule. So that's my risk register, as it were, for this particular project. I can now run an analysis again against this. And it's going to be bringing in this project for me. What it's doing now is to actually run through the project, looking through all of the activities, looking at the uncertainty in the duration of those activities. There we go. Actually also telling me something about the schedule itself. You know, have I got things in here such as a constraint that could potentially restrict my ability to do a full analysis. Open that up, and what have we got straight away? Okay, we've got a blue distribution, which is looking at the distribution of project end dates based purely on the uncertainty within the activity durations. The red takes those uncertainty into account, but also the potential impact of any risks upon those activities. What we can see now is that the deterministic date for finishing our project was the 10th of January out in 2023. What we're saying is that based upon the current risk assessment and an uncertainty, you've only got a 52% chance of meeting that. If you want to have a 90% chance, then you need to set your date to the 15th of March. Now, if you were going to commit on your proposal to meeting the 10th of January date, half the time you'd be late, potentially incurring penalty charges, etc. So you want to be very aware of how confident you are in meeting these dates. Over on the right hand side, we've got another tornado chart, this time looking at the activities, but it's much more interesting if we go and look at the risks. So now we can see those 3 risks, remember, from the register. And not only is it showing us which ones are driving the end date the most, when I click on them, it's actually showing me that this groundworks problem is contributing 34 days to my 15th of March end date. What can we do? We could, like I did before, create a scenario and just remove it. But that's probably not realistic. So what we can do is we can actually go in and look at some of the data. So let's see, well, instead of removing it, what would happen if we could perhaps halve its potential impact? So 20, 25, 30 days. Move back to our dashboard. As it's recalculating, we can see how things have changed. Yeah, so we can see that we've now got a 60% chance of meeting that deterministic date. And if we want to give a 90% chance, it's come in now to the 13th of February. We've saved ourselves over a month there. Interestingly, it's now showing that the top risk driving my end date is a different one. It's the windows don't match specification now. So in a way, if I'd carried on trying to mitigate the groundworks problem more, actually other risks will be taking over and actually still causing my end dates to move out. So in a way, I wouldn't be gaining anything more by doing that any further forward. As before, I could look at current and target, but also what people tend not to realize is that you can be looking at cost associated with your project as well. So not only can I look at the end date, oh, by the way, I could be looking at that end date at any milestone as well. I've just chosen the project end date there, so I can be looking at confidence values from milestones, but we can look at the cost as well. So this is actually an integrated cost and schedule analysis, right? Because we've got costs associated with the duration of activities, but also there can be fixed costs in there as well. For example, the amount of concrete you might need for your foundations, okay, and then a duration-based cost upon how long it's going to take to actually pour that concrete, which could vary, of course. And as before, I could write those results back up into Risk Controller and then run a trend report to see how my project end date has been varying over time. Once that completed, I get my little notification, and oh, my end date has been actually slipping out rather a lot. So, you know, again, another thing to start the conversation with management. Look, we're slipping. We need to be doing more. We've tried these things within Risk Analyser, but we still need to be doing more. Right now, it's not all about projects. So we've been looking at Monte Carlo there. Sitting down over here, I've actually imported some risks from things like the World Economic Forum. Okay, and I've chosen then some other risks sitting down here that are sort of specific to the sector that I'm working in, or perhaps even some that are specific just to my organization, but more generic risks. And I can see all of those in one go. Now, one of the things that we've mentioned is, this is all very well. I've got a list of risks here. Some of these have got a higher score, probably a combination of impact and probability. But let's have another look at these things. So I want to see how these things are actually linked together. And Predict Risk Visualiser allows me to do this. So instead of my static risk register here, I can now get a wonderful interactive view of how these risks are linked to each other. Okay? And this is an excellent way of starting conversations with people. I can move things around so that we can just really see how the risks are linked and begin to now focus. Oh, look at this one here. The US-China trade war. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 links out to risks that then linked off to multiple others. Okay. Now, I just cannot see that from my folder view over here. So that, oh, here we go. The US-China trade war. It's sitting right down here. It is a high one, but the real impact of it only becomes apparent when you're looking at that visualization. Now, we're looking at projects here, and this is where we were running our analysis from, and I can begin to see projects across multiple folders, or a program view, multiple projects here, but I can also pull these things together. So perhaps if I create a list of risks here, I've got some from my World Economic Forum folder, and then the projects A, B, C, etc. Now, how are these linked together? Okay, so let's run a visualization again, but this time we will group them by, we'll take country. All right, and let's have a look at that one. Already run. Okay. So now we're beginning to see things here as well. So I've got risks occurring. The climate action one is quite interesting. It's impacting risks within Germany and the United Kingdom, but for some reason not in the USA and Canada. Does that make sense? So it's beginning to help us ask questions. In my last visualization, I was really interested in the trade war that was linking across to multiple different risks. Because over here, the one that's almost standing out for me is the major cyber attack that's not linked to anything. I'm not sure I believe that. So that's certainly highlighted something for me to go and talk to people about. And that's what it's about. It's getting those conversations going. And it's this interactivity, this visualization, be it from Risk Analyser or Risk Visualiser, that gives us really good ways of having these sorts of conversations. So I'd like to start off a poll now. Is how do you engage with senior management and the project team? Is it proactively throughout the project? Only when things are going wrong, is that the only time the project team starts talking to senior managers? Or just on an occasional basis? Or never, they'll only talk to you once the project's finished or failed? So whilst you're choosing your poll results there, I'll move over and let Val come and finish off.
Well, I think that probably is about what we have experienced in across our customer base and the people we're generally talking to. That it tends to be a bit ad hoc. So the proactively through the project is obviously what you would hope would be happening, but it is quite common that people only get involved from a higher level when things are going wrong, and that's a bit of a shame, really. So let's move on and have a look at, as I said, our last section of the presentation is about risk intelligence. So risk intelligence starts top down. And the first thing we expect in an organization that is risk intelligent is that they have a positive vision for risk, and that it's aligned with the company's vision and values. And not only that, it's owned by the executive board, it's owned by senior management. At the next level, of course, you can't just have vision, you actually have to have strategy, and you need a risk strategy. We see the most successful organizations are really focusing on how to apply the ISO 31000 principles of understanding risk against their objectives, because that helps you keep a long-term view on risk, and that they actually focus on what we call risk intelligence, which includes having all those really important conversations which happen at middle management, in order to make to keep the wheels turning in the organization. It's middle management that helps create the positive risk culture on a day-to-day basis. And all of those things that we looked at in that previous slide about trust and working together and making sure that you're encouraging having risk conversations. So not seeing it as an unpleasant and a word and that you see as negative, seeing it as something that actually, if you talk about it, you can do something about it. And again, one of my, possibly my all-time favorite quotes is Wayne Gretzky, the Canadian ice hockey player come coach. You'll always miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So get out there and do it, but be proactive. The next level, and this is really a big focus of ISO 31000 is for risk intelligence, is integration across your organization. Now, one of the problems with integration is that an awful lot of people use spreadsheets for gathering their risk information. And unfortunately, that's both a product of and a creation of siloed thinking, because all these different spreadsheets everywhere are seriously hampering the ability to have good risk conversations across an organization. You need central structured information, and you need information that's available in real time in order that you can have those timely conversations. And what that helps with is it supports collaboration through that integration across the organization, and provides the organization with the ability to look forward, look ahead, see what's coming. And in today's ever-changing world, where we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone next month or next year, we really need to be ready. We need to be agile. And so we need that information in a timely manner, because timely information means fast decision making, which means ultimately leads to success. Once again, another quote, which I think is all about enabling these risk conversations and enabling risk intelligence. Ed Catmull of Pixar: it's not the manager's job to prevent risks, it's the manager's job to make it safe to take them. So having an understanding of risks, if you're going to take risk, you need to understand and analyze them. You need to have conversations about them to understand, what risk can I take, what risk should I not take. All right, and then finally, looking at the risk intelligent organization, we need to make sure that the board is on board. We should have a risk strategy in order to understand how to achieve the vision, a framework, because everybody has a role to play in risk, a risk program to implement and transform your organization, and of course, in the end, with risk, you just have to do it. And that can be one of the most difficult things of all, because risk is not everybody's day job. It's the thing that they do as an add-on for most people. And so getting everybody across the organization to do it, to do their risk actions, well, you need risk conversations. How are you doing on this? What's the, are you achieving it? Are you going to achieve it? So have risk conversations. And one of my last quotes: life is inherently risky, so we all face risks. But the biggest risk you should avoid at all costs is the risk of doing nothing. Right. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about us, and we'll go into questions. So these are our values, and we work across the world. Here we are sitting in Oxford, but we have people on the ground supporting our customers in North America and Australia, who cover Asia Pacific. We provide not just software, but also services. We help people shape their risk vision and strategy with risk masterclasses. We help them connect risk across their organization by providing support to their teams to put risk frameworks in place and getting people discussing risk. And we also help roll risk out across the organization, in particular working with risk champions, those people who understand risk and who are really going to help embed excellent risk practice across your organization. Trevor showed you a couple of bits of our product, the Risk Visualiser and Risk Analyser tool. We would be very pleased on our stand. And which stand are we on? Can anybody tell me? Anyway, you can.
Particular number.
Okay, all right. So we have a booth that you can join us on, and we'd be very happy to give you a more in-depth view of the software. Ultimately, we are risk people. We live, breathe, and are very keen to have risk conversations with all of you out there. And we promote risk intelligence. You can also go to our website and download our risk intelligence white papers. The first one, How Successful Leaders Thrive in an Uncertain World, and also the snowball effect, getting the risk intelligence ball rolling with middle managers. Right, so I know I saw one question come in during the session, which was about how you use repeated Monte Carlo and risk analysis in order to generate results that, sorry, I'm just reading off the board here, results of the specific project that you can apply to all of the same construction projects. That's a really interesting question, because I think that, you know, the siloed situation we have with so many projects these days is holds us back on this. But what in particular I can think of 2 or 3 organizations we're working with. One of them is working through digital transformation. They are focusing on making sure that they get all their projects not only running risk thoroughly throughout the whole of their projects, and some of these are very, very large projects, £1 billion, $1 billion projects, and they are then feeding all that information back. They're gathering that data. You have to gather that data in a database, because the analysis results are really just you do analysis, you play scenarios, you look at all of those things. You can save that as a status in time, but what you need to do is look at the trends, and as Trevor showed you, the trend reports, the outcomes, and then look at the lessons learned of which risks occurred, which risks didn't occur, which were the biggest uncertainties that impact your project. Now, that is the sort of thing that we collect in the database through the trend report and the outcome information. But not many people are doing that. So yes, it's the sort of thing that would really help, I think.
Next question we've got here is looks like saying it looks like it integrates with scheduling software, P6, MSP, etc., which it does, yes. But it's also asking, is there any integration with cost management software such as Ares Prism? And the answer there is well, perfect timing actually. We're just releasing what we're going to call Predict Connect, but it's part of the Predict suite, and that will be a two-way API that will allow tools such as Ares Prism to extract data out of Predict, or in fact put information and update information into the Predict database as well. That's literally going to be released this month. A couple of questions there. The bottom one to start with, I think. A great presentation, thank you. If for most of the team aren't educated in terms of risk, how do you suggest to sell risk and the value add of that to them? Oh, that's one of your favourite questions, Val.
I know. Yeah, well, I mean, this is why we launched our Connecting Risk service to work with customers, because connecting risk is one of those very difficult things to do in an organisation that's typically very siloed. So, I mean, an example of an organisation that I work with that was just fantastic was that we set up a central risk steering committee, and that risk steering committee was across functions, across projects, portfolio and programs, and we actually got people in the room talking, and then they came up with some thoughts on how to not only educate but also to start asking the right questions of people, because in an organization, connecting risk is more about having risk conversations. And one company we're aware of is also having something called the big risk conversation. And say, every day, are you asking the right questions? Because risk is not difficult. We do it all of us do it in our daily lives. We manage risk very well. We just don't manage risk very well from a company point of view. But it's often because there isn't any communication channel for people to have that conversation. Obviously, having something like a risk register where you can put risk into is okay. But you kind of need to have those conversations as well. You can't just use it as a dumping ground. You actually need to take an interest in what people are worried about, and also not allow people just to put loads of problems in there. It needs to be real, tangible risks that stop you achieving your objectives. So yes, I think having this middle framework, some sort of steering committee, and getting people asking the right questions, because if your boss is interested in something, you're going to be interested in something. If they don't ask you questions, then you won't do anything about it.